cattle and have a diverse crop rotation.
Thank you, Crystal. Kent Bleeger.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kent Vleeger. I'm the state soil health specialist with the NRCS, and I currently live and work out of the Huron area.
All right, Terrence Herman.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I'm Terrence Herman. I'm the district conservationist for NRCS at Sturgis in southern Meade County, and I'm kind of consulting with a number of our diversified farmers and ranchers getting into cover crops and really learning these 5 principles of soil health and how they can apply to their landscape and how we use it.
Thank you. All right, Van Manshine.
Good afternoon, Van Manshine from down Tripp County, South Central South Dakota. And we do a diverse crop rotation and custom graze cattle and do lots and lots of different things with cover crops.
Great. Luke Herman.
Yeah, Luke Berman from Lowry, South Dakota. We run a cow-calf, stocker yearling, and custom graze sheep operation here. We've also got a little bit of farm ground that I'm trying to figure out how the principles kind of fit both native rangeland and a no-till farming situation. So still learning for sure.
Oh, we're all still learning, right? Thanks, Luke. Anthony Black.
Yes, Anthony Bly, soils field specialist with SDSU Extension. I'm on our farm now in Minnehaha County, but my office is in Sioux Falls, so you'll be hearing from me in a little bit.
Perfect. Levi Newhart.
Yeah, I'm Levi Newharth. I farm and ranch on Prairie Paradise Farms with my wife and 3 kids. As she said, we have a diverse crop rotation and diverse animals. We have chickens and goats and everything. So we just try to implement the 5 principles the best we can and getting more livestock on the ground.
Perfect. Sean Freeland.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sean Freeland. I'm from Caputa, so just east of Rapid City. Primarily cow-calf producer. Have some stockers and try to finish some grass-finished beef on cover crops, and I guess so.
All right. So those in attendance can see we have a great group from all across the state. So wherever you are, you can definitely ask a question if you're wondering about how to implement or start one of the 5 principles or how they are doing it too. So we're going to start off with Anthony. He's going to do some newly released data from SDSU. We had that at our board meeting and it was very exciting for us to see. So we're going to have Anthony share his screen and we will go ahead and there you go.
Do I have to switch, Cindy?
Yep, you have to switch, swap.
Yeah, okay.
Perfect. All right.
Yeah, thank you for having me this afternoon. So I'm basically, in a sense, demonstrating the flow of information from researchers at SDSU through Extension to a useful to stakeholders in the field, to producers and farmers. And basically, I took their paper and I changed the title. And sometimes scientific titles aren't as catchy or get someone's attention as well. So X-ray scanning confirms soil health benefits from conservation practices is what I come up with. And so my co-authors on the paper are David Karki, our agronomy field specialist, and then Navdeep Singh and Sandeep Kumar are the research scientists that wrote the paper. So here's just a clip of the manuscript. It was accepted to the Soil Science Society of America Journal, which is a very prestigious soil science journal. It's all peer-reviewed by some very critical scientists, and they make sure that the methods and the conclusions are in line with what science would agree with. So the title of their paper was Grasslands Conversions to Croplands Impact Soil Pore Parameters Measured using X-ray computed tomography. And basically that's CT scanning techniques. So here's Sandeep and Navdeep, some really good friends of mine. Come to know them in the last 8 to 10 years. Here they are in a field that I met them at 5:45 in the morning almost. And so very dedicated scientists in their field and know the soil very well. So in this study, it's basically centered around taking cores, intact cores, if you will, undisturbed cores. And you can see Sandeep is pounding the Ulan sampler into the soil. And there's a core tube in the sampler on the end of that, which is in the soil now. And Navdeep is labeling one of those tubes. So there's that plexiglass core, that undisturbed soil sample entombed into that plexiglass core with, I think it's some cork material inserted on each end. And then on the right there, you see that core is laying horizontally in that CT scanner. And that CT scanner is located at the University of Missouri at Columbia. So this is what we found out. I'm going to go right to the good stuff. They had 3 comparisons, and these are from McCook County. And they had 3 comparisons. One was a conventional tillage corn soybean rotation, which is kind of the norm or typical for eastern South Dakota now. They compared that with the no-till system with a corn, soybean, oat rotation with cover crops there following the oats, and then grazing as well. And I'm pretty sure the farmer would have grazed the corn stalks and the cover crops and all of that. And then they were fortunate enough to have a native grass pasture that was managed well, also in the close vicinity to these other 2 fields, and they sampled that. And what you can see, I'm sure you've already looked at the pictures even while I was explaining the treatments, and you can see the very stark differences between them. And what you're seeing there is the green blotchy areas are the pores, are the soil pores themselves, the macro and the micro pores, and the distribution of those pores. You can see that the conventional till has porosity. I mean, there's no doubt that it's there. But the no-till with the other soil health practices is stark improvement or increase in porosity. And then comparing that to the native grass just seems to be more filled in, if you will, and a lot more pores. And I'll show you a more graphical depiction of the actual numbers in a few slides here. So first of all, I'd like to just go over the numbers, as well as scanning those samples with the CT scanner. They also measured the numbers in the lab, like soil scientists do. And so I converted those metric units, those SI units, into more understandable units that more everyday people can relate to. Of course, porosity is just a percent to begin with. So that's basically the number that represents the percent of the space that's pores. And so we can see in that conventional system, 49% of the soil is pores, going up to 57% in the soil health system, and up further to 67% in that well-managed native grass pasture. The bulk density is just the inverse relationship to that. That's actually a measurement of the weight of a given volume of soil. You can see that conventional soil is the heaviest at 94 pounds per cubic feet. The soil health system around 74 pounds, and then the native grass at about 62. So you can liken this, I guess in my area, we don't have a lot of native grass areas, but we have some long-term established tree groves that were probably never farmed in our area. And if you go out and start shoveling in that tree grove, you know, you can shovel all day because that soil is so light. So it'd be just like that, 62 pounds per cubic foot there. Then the internal water movement, I converted that to inches per hour, which I think everybody can visualize that, inches of water per hour of time. You can see that conventional system is only moving about 0.8 inches of water per hour. We're in the soil health system, we're up near 5 at 4.7, and the native grass is at 8.2. Of course, they also measured organic carbon. We can see that also increases from the conventional system to the soil health system to the native grass system. And one thing I added to the explanation was I made pie charts from the actual numbers. And so here you can see those three systems. The conventional system has approximately 46.2% of its space taken up in minerals. That'd be the sand, silt, and clay. 4.8% of that space is organic matter, leaving the balance in voids. And you know, we're not concerned with the water measurement at the time they took the samples. So I've just put half of the voids as water and half of the voids as air. And that's what we would consider as ideal. So you can see about 24% of the conventional system is water in this example. Going to the soil health system, about 37.5% is in the mineral fraction and 5.5% in organic matter, leaving much more space for voids. So increased water holding capacity, greater air exchange, all of those good things that we want to see in soil health. Then going to the native grass system, you know, wow, what a drastic change from the tilled to the native grass. About a third, you know, actually 33% is in the mineral fraction, 6.9% organic matter, leaving a lot more space to infiltrate water, store water, microbial activity, where all those things where that root action takes place at the mycorrhizal level. So with that, you know, in summary, the science is absolute proof that conservation practices improve soil health parameters. We've long known this, but to visualize it with an X-ray scan is really kind of neat. And I just like to say at the end, I'm extremely thankful to have worked with Sandeep and Navdeep on this project. They're just good friends, great scientists, and they care about what they do. So with that, I'm done, and I'll just go through our civil rights there, and this is my contact information, and please feel free to contact me with any questions as well as ask any questions in the upcoming discussion.
All right, thanks, Anthony. Could you put up the slide of the course again?
Oh, sure.
Just so I want, just as this group is getting their cameras back on and unmuting themselves, let's, you know, just take a look at that again. So, you know, we talk about the 5 principles and utilizing the system, and we always say we want to mimic nature. You know, that's what we want to do. We want to make everything as it was, as close as possible. So this system here is showing that it actually is working toward that mimicking nature. That producer is doing an excellent job of utilizing the system and keeping that living root in there as much as possible. You know, he has the no-till and not limiting disturbance. So Levi, what do you think about this slide and in the impact that, you know, the conventional tillage corn and soybean producers are, how their system is limiting their ability to produce?
Yeah, I think it's really cool to see this, and wonder if it's needs like more diverse roots or whatever in the system on the no-till system to fill in the gaps that the native prairie has. And then you can tell where you're destroying the roots and all that, then that's why it's not as filled in. And I feel it's really cool to see that. And just like on the water, it had like 0.6 on the tillage, and you had half of the native. And I mean, it's just amazing to see that and to feel that you seeing that wouldn't make you want to change something if you weren't doing it that way.
Yeah, just see the amount of impact that just doing a few different management decisions can have. I know, Luke, you had mentioned earlier about trying to figure things out on your cropland, and you do have native ground. And I know your native ground is very well managed in the Lowry area. So what do you think about some of these slides that Anthony was able to share?
Well, Levi kind of touched on the water infiltration part of it, and I think that's, at least in our part of the state, up in the north central part,
Yeah.
that's a pretty big deal. We've got pretty good adoption rate on farm ground for no-till systems already, and for quite a while, the vast majority is no-till. But then being able to incorporate some of these other practices because our crop rotations have been getting a little less diverse over the last 5 or 6 years. So it's not just the tillage or non-tillage part of it, it's these other components. And sometimes that I think that the benefits aren't seen in that first year, the second year, the third year. And but seeing this kind of data helps to reinforce that, yep, these are the right processes. It might take a while for everything to really start showing up as far as benefits go, but it's definitely the right way to go. And like you said, it's mimicking nature. I mean, there's nothing, it's nothing new. It's nothing revolutionary. It's what nature's been doing long before we got involved.
Exactly. Yeah. It's what our ancestors, our great grandpas were doing. I mean, they planted multiple crops throughout their seasons in order to feed their families. They had to continually plant something in order to harvest another crop. So it's nothing new, you're right. But we just need to remember and go back to making sure we keep things as well as possible and make sure we are mimicking nature. So I think this slide is really an impressive attribute to knowing that the system works. So, we're going to talk a little bit here about the 5 principles of soil health. So first one is soil cover. I think that's an important one, especially in years like, well, in any year, right? But when does that provide the biggest benefit, do you think, Kent, that soil cover? How do people see the benefit of that?
Well, it's going to be pretty evident, I think, especially this year, if we stay as we are with our moisture regime. It's looking pretty good for moisture in the southeast, and our western neighbors and friends are really wanting some rain. But the soil cover benefits both sides. The people on the southeast that are getting rainfall, it's protecting from erosion, helping with that infiltration rate. And our producers out west, where we're wanting a little moisture, the moisture that they do have is being held in place better by having that ground cover out there. So those are 2 really good examples that we see on a regular basis in South Dakota with moisture.
Yeah. So I have a poll here on soil cover. So one of the staff had put together, so I'm gonna put that out there. We'll see what some of the people put on that. So soil cover minimizes the risk of, Crystal, what do you think about soil cover? I know you guys do a great job of keeping something always out there. Do you bale off your corn stalks?
No, we always leave all the cover on the soil to feed the soil and protect it. We always tell our kids that the soil is like our skin, and you want to keep it protected, and you don't want the sun to dry it out and cause erosion. And it also helps with weed pressure, and it's a very important thing. Jonathan will argue with you that it's the most important principle is to cover your soil so you have soil. But yes, I think it's very important.
Yep. Yeah, that soil cover, we did a kind of a partnership with Avera that one year on the soil cover, and keeping yourselves covered as well as your soil covered, and why that is so important. You know, we wouldn't go outside in the winter when there's without a coat. You know, we want to say the same thing for our soil too. We want to keep that covered in the summer. How many of you producers on the panel, you know, take a thermometer out in your soil? Have you ever tested to see the difference if a neighbor has, you know, a tilled soil versus your soil, which is covered? I think Sean's done that before, haven't you, Sean?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I've got a little infrared thermometer I kind of carry around, especially early spring. Yeah, and it can be 15, 20 degrees difference where you've got it covered compared to where there's bare soil. So, you know, you were talking about keeping it covered in the crop wilting in your survey there. If you got that ground is baking underneath, it certainly wilts, you know, wilts those crops. So, yeah, just having that soil covered breaks up the raindrop too. If you think about wanting more infiltration, if you've got a raindrop that's split into a million different pieces, it's kind of makes a mist, and that helps infiltrate as well. So it's super important. Keep it covered up.
Yeah, that is, you know, usually our first one we talk about is just keeping that, going to keep that soil covered and healthy as possible. Limited disturbance, there's a lot of different ways you can do that. Most people often think of the no-till, but there are other ways, and that we want people to think about not just the physical part of it, but also chemical and biological. So we kind of want to have that conversation to have all of the different ways that you can disturb your ground. Keep that in your forefront and make sure you're thinking about, if I do this or apply this, what am I going to do to my system and how that happens. Van, do you have any thoughts on limited disturbance and how you've incorporated or not incorporated certain things to keep that healthy in your system?
Yeah, we're on a 10-year plan sort of on synthetics, both chemical and fertilizers. We have a goal in 10 years, we're in a third year of it, to be synthetic and chemical free in 10 years. And we just keep cutting back a little bit every year. And going back to the principle of keeping the soil covered, we have way less weed pressure now. With having the soil covered, the seeds can't germinate. We're also using cover crops to control those weeds. Mother Nature's going to want something green living, so we choose by using the cover crops to put what we want to grow versus Mother Nature decide what grows on the surface.
Okay, yeah. Anthony, you're in the Southeast. What do you see, or what has been happening down in that area for some of the 5 principles?
Well, we've had our long-term no-till producers around for quite a while, and I think of the Benson family in Minnehaha County that probably started no-tilling back in the late 70s. Of course, Al Miron came along in the 80s as well and started. And I have a good neighbor that heard Dwayne Beck in the late 80s and started no-tilling, and then I convinced our farm to switch as well. So there's been some new converts in the area as well, and I think that's just awesome. Very strong producers, and I think dedicated to that technique. But you know, we try to keep the ground covered as much as possible, and just on our farm, I've gone from using residue managers to not using residue managers. I just plant, and you can barely tell where my corn rows are at. And I know the first time I did that, I thought I was crazy, but I think those of you out in the West know the importance of keeping the ground completely covered. And we were thinking here that since we're wetter, that we need to open that up a little bit. But actually what it does is it actually uncovers wetter soil. And if you work with that residue on top and that implement rides on top of that residue, things just work a lot better. Of course, your planter needs to be in tip-top shape. It needs to have newer or sharp openers and the correct down pressure and the correct angle, hitch angle, but it can all happen.
Right, yeah. You brought up some really good points. The equipment is really an important part of it, not just your planters, but also, your harvest equipment too. I think Kent, you had talked, I know we do, Paul Yaza is always the equipment person that speaks for the Soil Health Coalition at our Soil Health School. This year, the Soil Health School is August 25th through the 27th, and it will be in the Mitchell area. So for those of you that are on, mark those dates down. We'd love to see you there. It's excellent 2.5-day event. The producers are there helping. We have classroom sessions plus in-field sessions where you learn about the 5 principles. Here, regional and local experts on it, but I think part of that Anthony said, can you touch on some of that Paul always would talk about, the equipment part of it and how important that is for residue and making sure that management part of it is efficient for your system? Sorry.
Yep, there we go. Sorry, I had to find my mute button. Yeah, so like Cindy said, if you haven't had a chance to go to the Soil Health School, sign up. It's fantastic. Mr. Yasa that comes up is really one of the better as far as it comes to equipment and equipment setup. But I'm going to kind of hit on what Anthony hit on with residue managers, and I understand the need for residue managers, and in some systems you're probably going to need to use those, especially first starting off with your kind of your no-till journey. But really, those residue managers, in my experience, are a lot of times set too aggressive, and it's almost, well, it's not almost, it is, it's shallow tillage. And so if you have those residue managers, I would just encourage you to take the pressure off a little bit, depending on what setup you have. Take the pressure off or lift them a little bit. Really, they shouldn't even be touching the surface if you are using them. They should just be kind of tickling that residue back. That's one of the things I see quite regularly, where they kind of set and they leave them at factory setting, and a lot of times factory setting is too aggressive for what we need. So that's, as far as equipment set up, that's probably one of my big things I talk with producers about.
Yeah, it's always important to know and have your equipment ready to go. So we talked a little bit about that. If we want to talk about diversity, the system, that's one of the principles is diversity. How can we incorporate diversity on your operations? Tance, do you want to talk a little bit about how people are doing it that you've worked with out west?
Certainly. Looking at it strictly through the lens of cropped acres, most of the systems this far west, semi-arid climate, typically your 14 to 16 inch precipitation zones on the average anyhow. Of course, we have lower years and better years than that too, but usually they're driven by small grains. Your wheat is the big thing, mostly winter wheat out here. Most folks I've talked to just don't ever get the real yield that they're looking for on the spring wheat side. So winter wheat's kind of king as far as the small grains for us, and getting them to just simply understand that comparison. Again, back to mimicking nature, we look at the rangeland across the fence. We've got 4 different growth forms out there: cool season grasses and broadleaves, and warm season grasses and broadleaves. And somewhere in our rotation, we need to have all 4 of those represented if at all possible. Right. Cover crops are really fitting that niche for our Western South Dakota diversified farms and ranches pretty well, because we have ready access to livestock, usually right across the fence at some point in the year. Water is a challenge. Shallow water isn't always available. So is there rural water available? Is there well water that can be piped at least to the fence line, if not out into that cropland? All things that we discuss and consider, but almost always we're missing that warm season broadleaf component. There are some sunflowers and safflowers grown right around where I'm at. But most of the time, the warm season grasses, your corns, your milos, your millets, things of that nature are pretty easy to get folks to do because maybe they've tried them before, but they just aren't a main component of that rotation. And so really just helping folks think about that. I don't care what species it is. I care that we have all 4 growth types represented somewhere in that rotation or in the cover crop mix.
Yeah, so that diversity is so important on the cropland and on your pasture lands and your grasslands too. So Crystal, you want to talk a little bit about the diversity you have on your operation?
So we have a lot of diversity. Like Tant said, we keep our crop rotation very diverse. We try not to grow the same crop 2 years in a row. We try to have a few year break in between to have disease and pest issues be in control. And then on our grasslands, we try to start and end in different areas when we rotate through our pastures with our rotations. We also have the goats and the cows. Goats are getting farther and farther from the house, which is good. We wanted to make sure we had predator control intact. But the different animals that you have on your ground also harvest grasses and forbs and stuff differently than others. They complement each other very, very well. And they're a very important tool in our operation. We're trying to get more and more hooves on more acres, whether it be grass or crop. And then we've been putting some of our hayland back into our grazing system to help give that some more rest and get some more diversity going there. And also the rotational grazing has also helped the diversity a lot, bringing some native plants back. And it's one big thing. Everything complements each other, and just got to keep kind of in symmetrical. I don't know the right word for that, but yeah, diversity is huge for us.
Yeah, I know you guys do a great job. Levi, you want to add anything on the diversity part?
She did a really good job. I mean, we're diverse, not only in our crops and our animals, but the different breeds of our animals is diverse too. So, but like you said before on the cover part, we use a stripper head. And so that really gives us a lot of residue out here. And like my son will argue, that's what I think it's pretty important too. That and diversity are right there. I mean, if diversity probably can be more important or just important, but I think those two are right there up towards the top. So.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. Van, do you have any different ways that you incorporate diversity into either your grasslands or your cropland? How do you put the diversity part of the system into your area?
Just pretty much the same way as the Newharts do, except I don't have goats. Looking to maybe add sheep down the road to our grazing systems. But I really make sure on all my cover crop species that I have all 4 forms of species. And I do as high as 20, 21, 22 way mixes just to make sure I have everything growing that I can. And we'll never put a warm season crop to back to back or a cool season crop back to back. We always just make sure that we're rotating them out.
That. Okay. Yep. So can you tell us a few of the different crops that you use? What is some of the crop rotations of the crops that you have in your rotation? Not just in the different species in your cover crops, but what are crops that you plant in your area?
We do corn, soybeans, oats, wheat, and alfalfa are our main 5. I want to add a cool season broadleaf. Looking into doing peas to get us a cool season broadleaf, because I think that's one thing I'm missing out of my system on a regular basis, and then it just gives you another chance for another cover crop right after it, because it's early harvested. So
Anthony, I know we've talked when we've had some different committee meetings and talking about the importance of the diversity and how we can help that in different areas, and we talked a little bit about some polycropping or companion cropping. Do you want to touch on that, or anything information that you've seen and how they can benefit each other?
Yeah, I'm an agronomist, a trained agronomist with a lot of emphasis in soil. So I pay attention to the agronomic principles, And competition is one of those. But we know from history that growing one crop in the presence of other crops may have some benefits. I'm not aware of the scientific proof of that, but I think there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that shows that growing crops together is could be beneficial. We just need to learn which ones to do that with. Some have recommended clovers under small grains, which our grandfathers did that, and I think that's a practice we could revisit.
Yeah.
Other suggestions have been flax and oats planted along with soybeans together, and then at some point removing the oats and the flax to harvest your crop of soybeans. The idea there is that, especially with the flax and oats, is that the mycorrhizal benefits of the oats and the flax could have some benefit to the soybeans. And that is something that definitely needs a lot of research attention. And, for growers to maybe want to try a few strips of this in a field would probably be a good thing. And, I think the door is open for others as well. Dan Forgy mentioned planting soybeans in the corn, and that those soybeans grew quite well. They get kind of tall, especially if you plant a forage type, and that possibly there is some synergy there as well. I think we've I talked about synergy a few years ago, and I've kind of forgot that term. I'll admit that, but I think synergy is some things we need to revisit, and we can do that. And so yeah, I was just trying to find my cover crop label in my records. Last year I planted it's a 28-way mix. I like cheap, and it was very cheap, and so that's why I got it. And I'm glad I did it. I mean, I had things out there I've never seen growing in our field before. So I think there is a lot of strong evidence for diversity.
Yeah. Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, I think we had a webinar earlier about keeping that living root and the diversity and the importance. And some of those tools will help you with knowing what each one of those crops, or if you're looking at a cover crop, what that will bring back to you. Why are you planting certain things? You want to know how it's going to help you. Sean, can you talk a little bit about the diversity and some of the things that you've tried on your area? I know you have experience with both grasslands and cropland and planting on pivots, and some of that information is so valuable for others to hear.
Yeah, so I just try everything. I just experiment. I don't know if that's right or wrong. So we have in our full season cover crop, we cut a maize and then have a pumpkin patch. And then in the past, we've had rye and rolled the rye down and plant no-till pumpkins into the rye. And then last year we didn't have that, so I just tried something with it. So we planted oats and clover, and then also, I guess that would be in between the rows of pumpkins, and then with the pumpkins we try to plant a Three Sisters deal. So we plant some corn and some sort of squash if we can, or peas or something. We just try to drop them in the same time as we're planting the pumpkins. But yeah, diversity to me is, you look at that cylinder that Anthony has and shows a native prairie, it's a no-brainer. You have to mimic the best you can. The only way to do that really is with cover crops and living roots, and unless you're going to go with grass, and which I think is super important to have grass in your rotation. But yeah, it's something we never plant just one thing. It's even if it's late and we're planting winter crop, winter triticale or rye, we still throw something in there, and it might not yield much, but it's something different. So and like our cover crop mixes, they can be up to 8 to 20, 21 or somewhere in their species too. Just you're giving something an opportunity to grow all the time.
Yeah. Luke, I know on your operation, you have some beautiful native ground, and you have some pastures as well. Have you ever had to interseed into a pasture to try to increase the diversity into that pasture?
Actually, that's something we really haven't had to do.
Okay,
I I guess not as far as like going out with the drill and planting
right.
something. One thing we've done at times to maybe increasing diversity wasn't always the primary goal, but we've
Mhm.
fed hay back on those pastures or on those hay fields. In some cases, yeah, we've been able to increase diversity just by bringing in the right kind of hay.
Mhm.
So if we got some places that are dominated by smooth brome, maybe we can bring in some hay with some intermediate wheatgrass or just some different things like that. I know there's places where we've unrolled an alfalfa bale that maybe got put up a little bit late, and a few
Uh-huh.
years later there's a strip of alfalfa growing right where that bale was. So there's some ways
Yep.
to do that, but it's kind of a two-edged sword also, because
Yep.
if we're doing that in the wrong places, then we're actually encouraging those introduced grasses, which have their place. But with our native ground, we got to be a little careful that we're
Yeah.
not encouraging a monoculture of brome getting established as a result of our not paying attention where we're feeding our hay. So it's kind of got to look at both sides of it.
Exactly. Yeah, we wouldn't want to bring in more of the introduced invaders. But so my husband, we fed some different seeds to some cattle and had it come out, and then that was able to be planted through the manure and things too. So we thought that was kind of a fun. It was just on a pasture that we wanted to have a few more natives going through it. So rather than taking a drill out and actually interseeding, we did it in a little different way.
Well, one thing, because, well, our ranch is called Rock Hills Ranch for a very good reason. And so going out with equipment just isn't going to work. But
Right.
I've had the intention, and I haven't ever gotten it done, but I've got a little grass seeder that goes in the back of the four-wheeler. And
Mhm.
this time of the year when the ground is soft and a little moist, I think it'd be really easy to just
put them in.
strategically move the cattle across an area that needs a little more plant diversity, but broadcast some seed out,
Mhm.
the morning before I do that. And I think it'll work pretty good.
Yep, and have the animals, even with that hoof action, put some of that in to it too. So yeah, I think that's very important. And like you said, you're trying to increase the diversity on some of your crop ground through some different ways. Do you usually plant for the cattle or for the livestock? I know it's a Rock Hills Ranch, so that is always the goal, right? Is to have a feed source for the livestock that are on your operation.
Yeah, to be honest, I'd probably be way off the deep end on some of this stuff if it was up to me. But the guy that my farming partner that actually does the work is he kind of keeps me grounded. Like, okay, that's maybe a little too far out in left field. So it's a balance between something that's economically viable, to keep the bills paid, but then also we're trying to incorporate something that the cattle can eat. And I think that's one of the great advantages that I've got plenty of animals. So
Mhm.
growing a forage crop, whether that's going to be grazed or put up for feed, is like I can get some value out of that either way. So yeah, when we go with our cover crops, we're definitely looking at what's something that we can utilize with the animals. One kind of interesting thing that we did this past year, which I got to think about all the implications yet, but we were able to run some dry ewes on soybean stubble, and those sheep could go and pick up all the beans. And I don't know that they really ate much of the residue. Granted, their soybeans don't have that much residue to graze, which
Mhm.
I didn't want them to graze the residue. But to be able to go and pick up all the beans that were on the ground, those ewes got fat as ticks, and it brought a little more revenue into that system. And we got another species grazing it. So
Right.
that was one that was new to me as a cow guy. I never saw that soybean residue had any real value, and I
Yeah.
sure wasn't about to go bail it up, whatever was out there. So there's some different things a person can look at if kind of think about it from a holistic approach. So.
Exactly. Yeah. And you did that in a way where you didn't have sheep. So you utilized someone else's sheep, brought them out to your operation. So that's something, the grazing exchange, for those of you that haven't seen it, that's an opportunity if you don't have livestock. don't let that limit that you can't add livestock to your operation. There are people with livestock and you can bring them to your operation. You just need to work out a system in order for that to work. Levi is another good example because he doesn't own cattle. He has cattle on their operation, but he works with someone else's cattle to bring that cattle onto his operation. So if you haven't checked out the grazing exchange, make sure you do that because that is a way for you to bring in the livestock. So the last principle that I guess we call it our fifth principle is integrating of livestock. And I think this panel is very diverse and able to share a little bit on every avenue of that. So livestock is truly, I think, one of the most important ones. If we can have not just having livestock, but having a diverse amount of livestock too. Like Luke is just touching on it now, he had cattle, he's bringing in sheep. I know Levi does too. Van has some. Anyone who would like to start off on starting with that? We've kind of touched on integrating livestock, but who would like to share a little more on how you are doing it or what you like to do or what you've seen?
I can talk a little bit about that. Probably the biggest selling point for soil health systems for us this far west is the ability to bring livestock onto those acres and recognize return in that form. I mentioned earlier, the limited moisture regime that we're dealing with, and this far west, we just, unless it's irrigated, we just about can't count on a cover crop being what we might consider successful as far as making forage after a small grain harvest or oats for hay or something like that. It's really a crapshoot. So we've embraced the full season cover crop mixtures this far west, whether it be cool season dominated or warm season dominated for then later winter grazing. It just works. And that's really how we've brought some of the farmers, true farmers that aren't ranching also, to the table and really consider that is that they can recognize a return maybe from a grazing lease or like many of our panelists here, custom graze.
Yeah, those are great points. So out west, there's a couple of you from out west. I know there has been, and I hope it's lessening, fallow periods where people are not planting anything because they think they're trying to conserve the moisture on that ground for a next crop. Do you see a lot of that still happening, or is it becoming less and less in your areas? Anyone want to comment on that?
Tance would probably be a good one on this because he gets out in the country more, but I personally am seeing less and less of that.
Okay.
I think guys are realizing that there's even guys getting a couple crops out here. If you can get a cool season crop in there and then still get something, a cover crop for the fall. For us, like for me, the easiest way to get started was to plant a winter annual, I think, and then be able to graze that. So this past year we planted triticale and we were able to graze it in the fall and then graze it again in the spring. And we haven't hayed for about 4 years, but this year we did hay a little bit of that triticale just for some square bales for our pumpkin patch and maize. And then we combined part of it. So and then you still have time to plant a warm season in there if you have the moisture. So and there's to get the most bang for your buck, in my mind, you have to graze it. It's just there's a totally different soil when you run livestock over it, even if it's just for a short amount of time. That's where you see the biggest changes is after livestock have been on it.
Yeah.
One thing that we have done is we've done a little bit with teff grass, and it kind of touches on a couple of the principles. So we'll grow the teff grass. We have the option to graze it or we can hay it. And then when you hay it early enough, providing Mother Nature's good to you, you can get some regrowth on it, which keeps your living roots working in the soil longer. And then you can graze it a little bit and then just make sure you don't abuse it and keep enough residue on the ground. But teff grass has been really good and other forage crops have been good. With not owning cattle, it is nice as far as risk goes. If a drought comes or if you have extra forage, you just get more cows or you send them back home early. So it's nice not having that extra risk on the cattle to help. And then with all the livestock, they recycle the nutrients really, really well for you. And they keep the plants and the roots stimulated to keep them growing longer. And it's just a nice, I don't know, a nice highlight to everything that's going on. Everything kind of all comes together and works together.
Yep. Anthony, down in the southeast, there's primarily the row crops. There are becoming more and more, I've seen a little more of the small grains coming in here and there. I think people are looking, I've seen some more rye in that area, just because I think they're trying to use up some excess moisture the last few years. This past year, we're a little drier, but do you see, how they're trying to do something with integrating livestock in that area? Or do you think that's still an area where we can improve on some ground in that area?
Well, despite maybe what everybody thinks, we have a lot of cows in the east.
I do know that.
Yeah, and it's challenging because I've been showing the pictures, the yield monitor pictures of fields where there's been cattle, and the farmer says, "Yep, here's where the cattle went," and so you try to explain, well, it's maybe it's a few steps ahead and a few steps back, but eventually, if you focus on getting your soil health improved, the load bearing strength of that soil is going to be able to withstand that weight. And definitely, I think on the no-till soils we can do that, but too wet is too wet. Yeah, planting green, Cindy, you mentioned the cereal rye. I love to plant green. I've planted green into winter wheat or cereal rye as well, and that just makes it so nice. The equipment is clean, consistent seeding depth, and I swear I could plant in the rain if I wanted to. And I don't know that I'm going to do that, but I mean that's how favorable the conditions are. I heard a story of a soybean grower. Maybe some of you know, that was just getting into it, and he had cereal rye get away from him. He wondered what he should do. And a lot of advice came in from a lot of great people about just being patient, just go out and plant. He told the story of how he learned, he took his residue managers off and he just planted. And he admitted, I couldn't find the seed. He said, I can't find the seed on a good day, let alone on a poor day. And yeah, I said, yeah, but you learn that if you have your planter set, if the weight is pushing, if you're getting those disc openers in the ground, then where the seed's at. You don't really need to find it. And he sprayed that rye off, and those beans were just great. And this guy was thoroughly impressed, and I was so happy to hear that those changes are taking place, because we can do this. We all know that. It takes little bitty steps. Sometimes change one thing and see where you go. And of course, I know some of you have jumped into it, clean up above your heads and made it work too. I know those stories, but I think by and large people are cautious, and having the cattle there really helps with the forage part, the cover crops part, and all those things. I don't have cattle on my farm, but I have 20 to 30 deer grazing my cover crops. So, I think that's pretty close. Yeah. So we like the wildlife on Bly Farm, and that's all important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those 5 principles, that's another one of the benefits. It does increase your wildlife as well. So we want that is a great point. And the compaction thing is something that I know the board and several people that I've talked with, they know it's something they're very aware of. Dan would always say his soil is more like a carpet, though. So he has that give, and he knows when he can. There's primarily, most people don't graze when it's wet. They'll do it on frozen ground. They'll have those cover crops for later. So as all of you have noticed, I promoted you over to the panelist side, so you can take yourself off of, put your cameras on and turn on your mic if you want to ask any of the panel a question. This is the opportunity to do that, or even share something that you've tried on your operation. That would be a great conversation. It's just kind of a fun way to talk about the 5 principles of soil health and make sure we all have our questions answered and get some ideas what we can take back to our own operations. So if anyone wants to share or go ahead and do that, they can take themselves off mute and have that opportunity, something that they've been considering for this year. You know, there might be this year, Mother Nature always gives us the opportunity to try new things because of the different circumstances that it brings to us. So some years maybe we're a little wet, so we can try something this way, or sometimes we're a little drier, or we have less cattle, more cattle. All of those are opportunities for us to try something in order for us to make our system work. So if anyone wants to add in on that, we'll have a few minutes left before our hour. You know, I am very cognizant of everyone's busy schedule. I know I'll definitely talk as long as someone wants to ask a question though, but if anyone on the panel wants to share some, final comments about the 5 principles and, how would you give advice if they're considering starting maybe one of the principles and introducing some of those aspects into their operation? Do you want to share anything, how you got started, anything that you want to share on those principles? Sean, you want to go first? Or Van, one of you that are getting ready?
Yeah, I'll share.
Thanks, Van.
First of all, I want everybody to know there's just tons of resources out there for you. If you have any questions, there's so many people that will help. Any of us on the board, anybody that's into this soil health journey will help somebody else. Don't be afraid to call, email, text, whatever. Social media works really good. I've learned a lot off of Twitter. But there's just so many resources available to people. And the reason I started my soil health journey was because I really wanted to make our farm resilient to drought and excess moisture both ways.
Mm-hmm.
And since we've been doing this, I can see when things get a little dry, our corn does not wilt as bad. It hangs in there. And when it's wet in the spring, we have much better soil structure than people that run tillage, and we can be out on the field sooner. So it just makes us, it takes a lot of stress out of the farming. We're not so worried about the weather as much. And I really enjoy it. But we're all here also to learn too. So if you have anything to share that you've tried, we like to hear new ideas too. So
Absolutely.
That'd be my main thing. But just go try to find somebody to help you. There's many people that are willing to help. So
yeah, great, Van. Thank you. Yeah, that's true. South Dakota farmers are some of the best, and I think they're very giving, and that's very evident, and they're great land stewards. So we want to make sure you understand that they are here. The Mentor Network is available. If you don't have a copy of the Mentor book and you haven't heard, there will be a Mentor app coming out soon. We will definitely get one of those in your hands. So Sean, do you have something you would like to add?
I think Van did an excellent job just pointing out that there is a ton of information out there. I think if I was to put my finger on one thing to start with, for me, it would be stop tillage. And I know there's a lot of people that don't think they can get their hands on a no-till drill. Most of the conservation districts have one. Seems like there's getting to be more and more guys drilling. So I think they're out there. And if you can't find, just reach out to one of us and we'll work hard to see if you can get that in your hands. I keep thinking about what Dwayne Beck said about if you're out in the field and get caught in a rainstorm, are you going to drive on your field, or are you going to drive on the grass on your pasture to get home? And I think some of us sometimes just have a block where we just can't see how do we get to that point. And I just want to say it's possible. You just need to keep looking at the grass, keep looking at the prairie, and study that. And even the pugging and that sort of thing. I mean, you don't take cattle off your rangeland when it rains. So if you can get that established on your crop ground, I think you're doing the right thing. But yeah, the number one thing I would say, stop tilling.
Luke.
Yeah, I think I don't remember who said it, but they have tried a little bit of everything. I think that was, yeah, Sean, you said that when you started, just experiment and try different things, and some stuff you're gonna learn from because it maybe didn't work quite the way you wanted, but I think you'll be surprised by the next thing and how well it works. And there's some things you don't even know. You don't even know what you don't know until you get out. And I know we talked about 5 principles, but I've heard other people say there's 6, and the 6th one is context and what is your specific situation and the resources you have and stuff. And so I think that's an important thing to keep your eyes open. Don't just look at these 5 things. Look at the 6th thing. What else is going on that's not covered in those five principles?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Levi.
Well, yeah, Dwayne Beck always says that the devil's in the details. So you really want to make sure that you have everything planned out and be careful on what you do. Don't if you haven't tried anything, don't go big. Try a little bit here or there. But I mean, yesterday was the day to start. But it's never too late. You can always get something going, and getting the livestock out there, I think, really is the key to get us to be close to the native pastures and getting it. I mean, your soil structure gets really great in your infiltration. You're putting more bugs out there. And we got to remember that when we're doing stuff, that there's more livestock below the ground than there is above the ground. So we got to make sure that they're happy also. And so just like as far as maybe tillage is really bad, but overgrazing can be very bad too. So, I mean, it's all about managing things, and it might seem like it takes more work, but really it doesn't. It's just a little bit more managing, and my kids love to go out and roll up fence and put up fence, and it's great it can be a good family activity, and if you make stuff fun, it's not work. So, I mean, just get out there and get your feet on the ground and look at stuff. If you don't look at it, you don't know what you're missing, and you just need to get out there and look at it and observe.
Great points. Yeah. If you haven't looked at your soil for a while, that would be a good first step, is to take a shovel, take a spade. And another point, I think it was Jay, if you see your soil, there's something wrong. So soil should be covered. You should have to dig in order to bring that up. So we want to make sure you take out a spade, look at your soil, compare it, see what it's missing, and yeah, try to keep it as healthy as we can. So Crystal, do you have any final comments you'd like to share with the group?
One of the meetings that we went to when we started tweaking our system even more that stuck with me. Somebody said, if you don't go home and change it within the next 3 days, the chance of you changing it is going to be slim the more time that goes by. So after one of our meetings we were at in North Dakota, we came back and I told Levi, I'm like, okay, this week we're buying chickens and we're making these different changes, because if you don't do it right away, you'll just keep shrugging it off. And just remember, everything is long-term. Won't be overnight results, and just keep going at it. It will get better. I've noticed with some of the stuff that Mother Nature throws at you with disasters, that we're able to recover a lot more efficiently than we did before. The more years that go by doing what we do and learning the different ways that we should be making changes and what's our strong points, it does help long term. And being diverse and not having all of our eggs in one basket also helps. That way, if we do get a disaster somewhere, the farm can feed off of another resource to keep going, instead of one disaster taking everything out.
Yeah.
But yes, everything's long-term, and hang in there. It will get better.
That's right. Okay, Kent, we haven't touched on much in programmatic type things. If you want to touch on that a little bit, if you are looking at wanting to adopt a new practice or different things, there are different opportunities out there if you're looking for them. If contact conservation offices, extension. There's even the Soil Health Coalition this year is able to provide cost share for some cover crops within the watershed areas. So reach out. Kent, do you want to add anything on for the end of our area?
Not really. I think you covered the programs really well, and I think the producer panel did an awesome job kind of talking about the importance and the hows and whys of what they're doing. I really think that the study that Anthony presented for him and his colleagues it's really important, and I think that we don't talk enough maybe about how you get your soils to look like the really nice x-rays that we're taking of that native range and the soil health cropland. And really the only way to do that is you have to have life to create that. And so you need the living roots and you need that diversity. Otherwise you're not going to get that nice porosity and the aggregate formation. So that's really important. So I thank Anthony for what he presented today.
Yeah. All right, Anthony, any final comment? Yeah, I think I gotta emulate what Kent said. It's diversity. We did no-till and corn and soybeans for many years on our farm, and when I made the decision to change the rotation and add diversity, I saw the fire. I saw the fire start. I saw the soil start on fire. That's probably a poor word, but it just it exemplified or it amplified everything that we were doing. The no-till is good. Don't get me wrong, but it needs the 5 principles. Usually, when you go out and you see a problem and you diagnose the problem, you can usually answer the question by figuring out which one of the principles is lacking, and that's I think pretty universal. So with that, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Tan.
There's something important in having Levi and Crystal both on this conference call right now. And for those of you that maybe haven't jumped and taken that first action like Crystal was talking about, whoever the other stakeholders are in your operation, bring them on board. Hopefully they buy in, but at least tell them what's going on, because your neighbors are already going to think you're crazy. You might as well get the people that are in business with you on board, and it'll make your life a lot easier. But Anthony summed it up just right. You got to have a recognition of all 5 of those principles. And if you're problem solving, it's been mentioned before, reach out to one of us. There's plenty of helpful hands around and eyes to help you troubleshoot. And we're your biggest cheerleaders if you're just getting into this. We want to see you succeed. So reach out for help. Yep. Don't be an island.
Right. Thanks, Hanson. Thanks everyone on the panel. That is specifically why you created the coalition. The coalition is here. They're a board of directors of farmers and ranchers across the state and members from all across. So we need all of you to utilize that membership. And if you need any assistance or if you have a question or an idea, make sure you reach out to us and I will get you connected with someone. If you have something that you want the coalition to do, we're here to do for education and research. So if there's something you want or have a question, and you don't have an area on your farm right now that you want to see some results, contact me and I can work with the staff and the directors and see where we could find an opportunity to plant that certain companion crop or whatever it is, or integrating those animals onto the operation too. So we want to thank everyone for coming today. Anthony, thank you so much. I will send Sandeep another email to thank him for the excellent data. I think it's very evident that the system is working and we need to continue to make people see Mother Nature is definitely who we want to follow. We want to have that mimic that nature. So the more we can do, the better. your soil will be able to produce. So we want to keep that healthy there. So thank everyone and have a great day. This recording will be up on our website within the next couple of days. So if you have any questions, you want to see those slides again, we will get them to you. So thank you so much and have a great afternoon.
Bye, everyone.